So it's the end of 2 days. Do I dare ask you how you're feeling? Um, Mo, thank you for just inviting me here again because I was here about 4 years ago, I think. And I'm hoping that for those of you who were here last time, you'll see this as fresh. Um, and I've had the opportunity to think a lot, obviously, over the last 4 years, especially during the pandemic with our work. We thought, in April of 2020, my executive director and I were sitting around thinking like, we're going to have to close the center. Who the heck is going to be hiring our team to do trainings in emotional intelligence? And little did we know we'd have the biggest 2 to 3 years we ever had. Last year alone, we trained 800 new schools and spread more globally than we ever anticipated. And I think that just lets us see that people are starting to realize that emotions matter, and they matter a lot for everything in life. And with that said, I'm going to jump right in because we only have 2 hours, right? Well, I always just like to give people resources up front because I always forget to do it at the end. So if you'd like to learn more about our center, you can go to my website and go from there. Social media is there. And then the work that we do specifically in companies is on the right. And now we're going to jump right in. So I wanted to just start off by saying something that I did earlier today. I never in my wildest dreams thought that I would have impact. It's hard to have impact in my opinion. And 20 years ago when I was sitting with my uncle Marvin, who was a middle school teacher in the Catskill Mountains of New York State, or 23 years ago now, Marvin was like the Robin Williams character in Dead Poet Society. He really was. He would come in as a pharaoh and teach his classes, and he was seen as a maverick. Now, I don't have a lot of time to go into the story of Uncle Marvin, but what I will tell you is that he was pretty much let go as a teacher because of the work that I now get accolades for. And I have mixed emotions about that, right? Because he was someone whose career ended because of his interest in helping kids learn about feelings. And parents thought, like, you're prying into our kids' lives, you shouldn't be talking about that. Other teachers were envious that his classes were engaging and inspiring. And in the end, the principal and superintendent of his district threw him under the bus and basically said, it's too much too soon. Now, I'm also proud to say that 22 years later, that district now uses our program. But poor Uncle Marvin has passed and he has not seen that. And so for me, I'll just start off by saying the theme of, I think a lot of people's presentations are about how our personal experiences can be sublimated into careers. And I'm one example of that. I was a kid who suffered a lot. I'm a survivor of sexual abuse. From when I was 5 to 10 years old, I was abused by a neighbor in our neighborhood. And I didn't tell about it because I was threatened by the abuser. If I share what's happening, I will be harmed, my family will be harmed. I had 2 parents who loved me a lot, but neither one of them had an emotion education. And so my mother had terrible anxiety and she was sneaking her doers at night watching Johnny Carson. And my father just had a lot of anger that he had not really dealt with. And so my mother would say things like, don't tell me the details, I'm having a breakdown. And so I learned quickly, I'm not going to talk to my mama about my feelings because I don't want to have a breakdown. And my father was the traditional guy from the Bronx, New York. And he'd say, son, you're going to toughen up. As a matter of fact, I'll never forget one conversation I had with my dad where he said, son, I shouldn't tell you this, but I used to beat kids up like you. I'm like, Dad, we don't call that like parent-child bonding, Now, in the end, my father and I ended up having an amazing relationship. But it took, 10 years of therapy and 20 years of therapy for him. And not everybody has time for that. So I've become a prevention scientist. My theory is that we need to think about this from womb until tomb. And so I'm just proud to say, as I begin my presentation, that what started off with a teacher helping one classroom and one nephew, has now over the last, as of this year, has been implemented in over 4,000 schools, reaching 4 million students, 150,000 educators, and now we're in 27 countries and growing every day. And now we'll go into the details. Thank you. Appreciate that. So now we get into all about you, because we're not going to talk about schools today. If you want to learn all about the school-based work, reach out to our center. I'm happy to talk about that. I've done millions of presentations on that. Today it's all about you. Now, with that said, this is a tool that's deceptively simple. My colleague David Caruso and I built upon the work of James Russell, who is a psychologist, an emotion psychologist, and have built tools to help us build awareness of emotion. All of you have feelings right now. You've spent 2 days learning about lots of different concepts. And in the end, what we can do is think about our emotional life across 2 dimensions. The first is pleasantness. Now, unfortunately, most people think of this as positive, negative emotion. I want to just say up front, there's no such thing as a negative emotion. There are no negative emotions, there are no bad emotions. Emotions can be unpleasant or pleasant, but life is filled with pleasant and unpleasant experiences. We all know that. If we frame them as negative or bad, it's automatically putting a judgment on them. So -5 would mean that right here, right now, you are having the absolute most unpleasant experience of your life. Like you're looking at me and thinking, I hate this guy. Oh, I want to go home. +5, you're like, oh my God, this guy, like I just wanted to move in. He'll be my personal emotion coach. I go back up every morning and have coffee with Marc and talk about my feelings. So somewhere between those 2 dimensions you are. Where are you right now between -5 and +5? Just in your head. At a visceral level, the pleasantness axis is getting at the following. Thrive, not thriving. Feeling safe and welcome, feeling unsafe and unwelcome. My brain is making predictions that things are going to be okay. My brain is making predictions that things are not going to be so okay. On the y-axis, it says energy. So all of you have some degree of energy right now. -5 would mean you're in your deepest pool of despair. You're just like a crane couldn't lift you up because you're so tired and exhausted. +5, you got so much energy you can't contain it. So now, obviously, Math 101, cross our axes to create our 4 quadrants, yellow, red, blue, and green. So where are we right now at whatever, almost 5 o'clock on a Saturday? We should be drinking now, right? How many of you are in the yellow? High energy and pleasant. Green, pleasant but low in energy. Anybody in the blue or red right now? Notice that people got like a little discomfort with that, right? They're like, like, who's the angry one? I mean, it's a signal, right? That there's some discomfort and some judgment again about being over in that blue and red. Now, I'm going to give you 3 seconds to find your word, your feeling word or feeling words. You got 3, 2, 1, freeze. Let me get an honest raise of hands. How many of you had some trouble finding the word? Hands up high. Really high. Lift it up. Straight up in the air. Freeze. Keep it up. Look around the room. Great. So we have like a room filled with emotionally illiterate, mindful people. Just the outcome we were hoping for from this conference, Mo. Any hypotheses around that? Yes. Yeah. We don't have to have just one, but I hear you on that. There are a lot of words. Yes.
The other way, I don't know. Rap.
Okay, so just like lots of different feelings and like other hypotheses? Yeah. We'll go to you next. You never asked how you're feeling. There's a first for everything. So you're saying that people don't really ask about it. How about for you? Uh-huh. All right, well, you're ahead of the game. Any other hypotheses around why that word choice is hard? Not enough time to get granular. How much time do you need? A while? Yeah, we don't got the time. And it makes sense, right? Maybe we're not used to processing and practicing how we feel. Now, I've got about 45 minutes, I've been told, to talk about my stuff. How many of you at some point during my presentation, how many of you are going to get distracted? Raise your hand. Everybody put your hand up high. If you're going to, okay, look around the room again. All right, so now let's put this all together, right? We have emotionally illiterate, attention deficit disordered, mindful people. This is like, I don't even know what to be, I mean, like, I say we just shut down. Wow. And now I dare ask you what your strategy is to be present, because I'm not going to believe anything you say. And if you say you're going to be mindful, I'm going to lose it. Or you're going to be present. I just did a talk in San Francisco a few months ago, like, I'm going to be present. I'm like, you're weird. Now, seriously though, what's going to be your strategy? If you start thinking, oh my gosh, I got dinner plans. Oh my gosh, I want to go back to my room. I want to go to the hotel. I got to text my family. I got whatever. We all got stuff going on. What is your strategy for dealing with your feeling? Anyone have a strategy? Yes. Well, let's think about it. If I'm presenting and you're distracted, how much learning will you get out of it? Well, by definition, if you're distracted, you're probably not focusing or learning. No? Notice and let it go. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Good luck on that one. How many of you find it hard to be present? It's hard. Let's be real. Come on. It's hard. So we're going to try to be present. We're going to, what'd you say again? No. Notice and let go. Okay. Anyone else have a strategy? Nice. No negative. Catch the feeling. Catch the experience. Catch, connect, catch, convert, create. Thank you.
It doesn't work in your.
I don't care about any other context. You get up and jump and move. Okay. Any other strategies? Just squeeze on it. Okay. Sometimes it works. Last one.
No.
All right, thank you. How many of you, anyone here have children, just for curiosity? Anyone here have a child have like a meltdown during the pandemic? Anybody as a parent have a meltdown during the pandemic? Yeah, I had one of those meltdowns. I shared, no, I don't think I shared this earlier. My husband is a filmmaker, and he's Panamanian, and his mother had come up to visit us during the pandemic for a family wedding. And the wedding was March 3rd. And we thought Irene, who we love dearly, was going to be here for a couple of weeks and go home. Lo and behold, there are no flights back to Panama in March or April or May or June. I mean, like literally, remember the airlines are shut down for a while. No international flights, nothing. And so like it's July, we don't have a huge home. Irene is 80. She doesn't want to go outside. She doesn't want to learn how to make coffee. And I'm a growth mindset kind of guy. Like, this is how you turn it on, you put the coffee in, you're like, and then so every morning she'd wait for me to get up to make coffee. And I'd be like, you got to make your own coffee. We got to work it. You got to do it. You got to do it. You got to do it. And then things got ugly because I was working like a dog because my center shut down. Everybody's working remotely, and like people are working, they're not working. I don't know what the hell is going on. And the film industry shut down, so my partner's staring at me working all day, and he's wondering what the hell he's going to do with his life. And then he decided, I'm out of here. I'm going to go make a movie. I'm like, you're going to make a movie? Like, I understand this. He's like, I'm going to Los Angeles, and I'm going to drive home and make a movie. And I'm like, so you're leaving me here with your mother? He's like, yeah, because I can't take it anymore. I'm like, you're in Zoom, you're with people all day. I'm just staring and freaking out. Okay, not a problem. And then one evening we had this like family meltdown, and my mother-in-law looked at me, and she goes, "Are you really the director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence?" And I looked at her, and I just was like, I was in one of those places, and I said, "Not tonight." You know? And we ripped each other up. I mean, we really did. And of course, I went to bed that night thinking, you are the freaking director of the center, right? And like, where's your strategies? And what I realized is that it's hard to regulate. It's hard to regulate. And so many of us have knowledge. We have knowledge of this stuff. Like, I've written about this endlessly. I could articulate every strategy that has evidence base, but it's hard to apply it. Do people relate to that? And as parents, right, you can tell your kid, like all the strategies that you share with me, honey, I want you to be present. Honey, the convert, create, and conquer, right? Or honey, just be with it, and then ground yourself, and then let it go, and then it may come back, and if it doesn't, that's okay too, right? I mean, like, these are esoteric concepts for a lot of people, especially for children. I have no idea where I'm going with this presentation. So I do want to tell you a few things. The first is that you can get granular. This is the cheat sheet. This is just from the inside cover of my book. And I'm going to give you another cheat sheet because something really positive happened actually during the pandemic for me, which was that the founder and former CEO of Pinterest reached out to me after reading my book, and he said, I would be interested in working with you to create an app. Would you be interested? I said, yes. And so for 2 years, Ben and his team and my team at Yale worked together. We brought the brightest and the most brilliant people and the most creative people, from people who worked at Pinterest, who volunteered, software designers from Europe and all over the world. And we came together and we just worked and worked and worked. And I basically translated all the science into a tool where you can plot your feelings, 144 emotion concepts, so you get all your definitions. You can, after you share how you're feeling in the app, you can add a photo of where you are. You can journal either with your typing or your voice. You can tag your feelings with things like where you're at, who you're with, and what you're doing. And then it analyzes your data to give you a report to let you know, like, how have you been feeling and how are those feelings related to who you're with, what you're doing, and where you're at. And then when you want support in regulating your feelings, what you do is you click the regulate button, and we've taken all the research on emotion regulation and put it into the app. And we hired diverse actors to help us make it look good. And there are 36 evidence-based strategies to support you, from mindfulness exercises that many of you know already, to cognitive strategies like engaging in reappraisal or distancing, to social strategies like reaching out in a particular way, to physical activity exercises. And so check it out. It's right now, we're only in beta form. It's available only on iOS, unfortunately, because we built it in one platform to get it right. Within 3 months, it'll be available on all platforms. And I'm really excited to say that through generous donations, it'll be available for free forever. Thank you. Now, why do we need tools like this? Because, as you've heard from the last 2 days, we're not in the best emotional shape. My primary research is in education. At the beginning of the pandemic, I launched an international study on educators' emotional lives. And what we found in that research is the following. Anxiety is the #1 emotion. There's 135,000 educators. And frustration, there's some gratitude, but if you aggregated people's emotions, what you get is about 70% red and blue, about 30% yellow and green. Don't think that's a recipe for wellness. Now, again, like I said, no negative emotions, but unpleasant emotions, while they're real and important, we shouldn't be having them 70% of the time. Ideally, it would be the flip. And so when you look at that on this tool, the motivator, we just plot the feelings, we get these emotions. Now, we've done many studies on what we call ideal affect. How do you want to feel? And that varies as a function of lots of things like time of year, where you're at, who you're with. But in general, we get things like excited and happy and joyful and fulfilled and calm and satisfied. And so this leads to the big question. What do we do with all the red and blue? And is the goal to get yellow and green? Probably not. It's not realistic. And I'm going to argue that it starts with this. So earlier this morning, when Mo and I were talking, I shared that in my travels across the world talking about this stuff, especially in the business world, there's a lot of misconceptions. I'll give you an example. So I give a talk at a very famous hedge fund in New York City, and Professor Brackett, I'm going to tell you what emotional intelligence is. Okay? Charisma. I'm like, sorry, but like, it's not in our definition. Do a talk at a like fancy private school on the Upper East Side. Are you Dr. Brackett? Yeah. I made my millions because of my emotional intelligence. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go in the taxi now, like go home. Thank you. And endless, people thinking about its success, its charisma. It has nothing to do with that. And I've also realized that people are desperate to do skill development. Everyone wants the skills. Everyone wants to learn the strategies. Parents, I do so much work for families. And parents say things like, they come to the workshop and they say, I need the skills. I want you to teach me the skills to help my kids, X, Y, and Z. Then they leave thinking, oh, shit, I got a lot of work to do on myself. And I share this with you because I think there's a piece that comes way before. And I call it permission to feel, or permiso para sentir, which is what I've been trying to give my mother-in-law for a long time. Now, what do I mean exactly by that? Well, I share with you a bit about my childhood. And I know my story is my story, but I know from talking to many of you that you have your own stories. Some of them involve maybe abuse. I'm sorry if that's the case. Maybe it's neglect. Maybe it's unbelievable joy. But for the most part, what I've learned in my research with literally hundreds of thousands of people is that for many people, their emotional lives were neglected. There wasn't a lot of emotion talk at home. There wasn't a lot of amazing modeling of healthy regulation. Now, some people, yes, but the majority, not so much. And here I was, a 5-year-old being abused and going into my own home and not feeling safe to tell my parents what was happening to me. So what happens to a child who is in those conditions, or an adult who is in a marriage, or a person who's in a workplace, who is in an abusive relationship with their boss? Your emotions have to go somewhere, don't they? They have to. So for me, they went into an eating disorder as a young kid. For me, they went into self-hatred as a child. For me, they went into crying and banging my head against the wall and doing not so healthy things. And then one day, there was this
guy on the upper work who was in his master's degree
in the town where I grew up, and we were sitting in the backyard. And for some reason or another, he noticed me. And he looked at me like no other adult had ever looked at me before. And he said, "Mark, how are you feeling? Really, how are you feeling? I'm noticing something." And it was that moment that I decided to just let it all out. I hate my life. This is what's happening. And he didn't say, "Don't tell me I'll have a breakdown," or "You better toughen up." He just looked at me and he said, "We're going to get through this together." And so in that moment, which I remember to this day, which is now over 40 years ago, I had the permission to feel, the permission to be my true self. And it wasn't until that moment that I really ever had that. And I've been really curious, as I've done research, to ask people, did you have an Uncle Marvin? Was there an adult in your childhood who supported you in being your true, full, feeling self? Think about that for a minute. It could have been your parent. It could be an aunt, an uncle, a coach, a teacher, a neighbor, an older sibling. But someone who just allowed you and gave you the space to be you. And I see some, people like, "Oh shit, I gotta go for therapy now after this presentation." And, it's important because that's where it starts. It doesn't start with like learning a strategy to regulate. It starts by creating the conditions for people to be their true feeling selves. It has to start there. Now, I've had the honor of asking lots of people this question, and this is what I've learned. Things that you've been talking about for the last 2 days, all those things that you've been talking about, empathy, compassion, non-judgment, supportive, when I ask people to describe their Uncle Marvins, those are the words they use to describe their Uncle Marvins. Now, something magical happened to me. So when my book came out, I was on my book tour right before the pandemic, and I was in Westchester, New York, and I was sharing. I never really talked about my uncle as much as I did, and I didn't share. In my book, I only talk a little bit about my childhood because it's not about me. The book is really about everyone else, and I wanted to be careful about how much I went into that level of, self-disclosure. I don't want to get distracted by it. And I'm giving this talk about my uncle and my research, and this one man looks at me and says, "Are you talking about Marvin Moore, the sixth grade social studies teacher from social studies, blah, 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 from Monticello, New York?" I'm like, "Yes." He's like, "Your Uncle Marvin was my Uncle Marvin." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Your uncle was my sixth grade social studies teacher 40 years ago." I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" I'm like, "I've never met any of my uncle's real students. Do you mind like staying after? Because I want to interview you." It blew my mind what this man remembered. I just blew my mind. He went for 45 minutes talking about his sixth grade social studies teacher, his facial expressions, his body language, the smile that he did, the way he greeted students, the way he talked about feelings and taught history. When he talked about feelings and taught history, it was just on and on and on. And so it made me think about my own life. I am a workaholic. I work endlessly, and I'm proud to say my niece is here today. And it's my brother's daughter. Actually, my brother freaks out when I give these presentations. When my book came out, I talked about how I had given this presentation. I was talking about like my childhood and my mother and father, and my mother had breakdowns, and my father was angry, and my brother's like, "The hell are you doing?" And I remember my brother saying, like, literally at this one presentation I gave in New York, I was like, they came to say we're up front, and I'm like, "Guys, what'd you think?" And my brother's like, "Don't walk out with us. We're embarrassed to be your brother." Right? He's like, "You shared so much. You're so disclosed." I'm like, "Steve, like the more I share, the more I charge." Anyway. And so everybody has a level of readiness for this work, right? But it made me realize, right, am I paying it forward? Am I an Uncle Marvin? Am I giving back, all of that? And I think if there's one little lesson, right, from today, it's just be an Uncle Marvin. Try the best you can. The mere presence of an Uncle Marvin deactivates someone's nervous system. We all know what that feels like. That when we're around someone that exudes empathy and compassion and non-judgment, we just feel at ease. Now, some people, when they hear that, can we get to the science? That is science, by the way. That's data. Now, I won't go into a lot of detail on this right now because you can read and learn more. But I've spent my career on this slide, basically doing the science to ensure that no one can argue with me. Because I just felt like everybody has an opinion. Well, guess what? This is not opinion. In my book, this chapter where I call it Emotions or Information, I have 800 references, scholarly references for every one of these points. So like no matter what, I call it my money slide. And I call my money slide because when I get a leader who says like, I don't know, is this right for our organization? I'm like, do you know the science? Do you know the research? And so emotions, as we know, are the drivers of our attentional capacity. They influence every choice we make, whether we're conscious of it or not. They are signals to approach or avoid, period. The way we express our emotions sends signals to the world. I respect you, I disrespect you. I got more power than you, we're equals. Clearly affect our physical and mental health. And as someone who, grew up kind of in a blue-collar family, who now teaches at an Ivy League university for 20 years, who has no relation, just don't even get the whole thing, because I would never have gotten into a place like Yale as a student. When I first started there, I just felt like, who are these people? Like their parents read Shakespeare to them. My mother said, get to your room. Like that was a little different childhood. And I just had this assumption that everyone was going to be enormously successful. And now I know my students really well, and I've researched my students. And even with all of their high SAT scores and their amazing grade point averages, many of them don't achieve their dreams in life. And as a matter of fact, I get a lot of resistance to this work from my students. I teach a course called Emotional Intelligence. And the resistance is unbelievably high in terms of they want to know, oh, the Brackett paper 2004 shows that emotional intelligence correlates 0.4 with that. They love that shit. They like memorizing the research finding to then spit it out on the test. But they don't want to sit there and practice and learn the skills. As a matter of fact, I had one student, I'll never forget this. She's like, Professor Brackett, are you telling me I have to put emotion regulation on my to-do list? Yeah, and like a lot of other things. Hi. And so I share that with you because at a place like where I work, IQ no longer has any predictive value. Everybody's smart. So what that tells us is that it cannot be the prediction of your success. Does that make sense to everybody? It's like if you're a basketball player, you're tall. Everybody's tall in basketball, so your height does not predict your success because everybody's tall. And so it's got to be other factors, there's other talents, other skills as a basketball player. Just like IQ is a necessary but insufficient variable in predicting success. And what I find in my research is that people who have the strategies to deal with their feelings are the ones that have that extra little advantage. Why is that? Because life is filled with disappointment, frustration, overwhelm, anxiety, feedback. I mean, my students do not like feedback. As a matter of fact, most of them have a fixed mindset. They're just there to get the grade to go to the next thing in their life. They're not there for actually learning. So that means we all need to kind of think about this in a different way. And what I'm going to urge you all to do is think like an emotion scientist. And somebody asked me, Mark, if there's one thing you can do in your career, what would it be? I said, I would be able to shift the world's mindset so that everyone would be an emotion scientist and not an emotion judge. So what does that mean? It means all emotions are information. Emotions are ephemeral. They come and they go. It means we have to get granular and specific about how we're feeling, know how we're feeling. It means that when we don't deal with our feelings well, we realize that there's an opportunity to grow, as opposed to the emotion judge, the person who has that fixed mindset, the person who attributes, why are you so angry? What's wrong? I have an aunt like that. She called me, is everything okay? It wasn't until you called. Like, I don't know, now I'm anxious. I don't know, maybe something is wrong. I don't know about it. My father was an emotion judge. He had a lot of problems with anger, and he'd say, son, this is the way I deal with my anger. You're going to have to learn how to deal with it. There's no place to go with that. There's no curiosity. There's no movement. So ask yourself, are you an emotion scientist or are you an emotion judge? Here's what I've learned over the years. I'm an emotion scientist with all of you. And then my husband says something, I'm like, get over it. Move on. It's interesting. We're emotion scientists oftentimes with the people that we're the least intimate with. Our own children, our own significant others, we're the most judgmental of them, isn't it? It's kind of interesting. Now, here's what we know from the research, that this reward system needs to include EI skills. We know from research that people are looking for this. And so just to spend a little bit of time, and then what time do I have to end? I know that I started a little late now just because, 5:30? I got 12 minutes? That's good, that's fine. I'll keep it to 7 anyway, but you can leave if you have to leave. We can't create an emotion revolution in 40 minutes. So let's go through this really quickly. First step, we're going to give ourselves and everyone we care about, and even the people we don't care that much about, the permission to feel. Everybody gets the permission. The second step is we're going to strive to be an emotion scientist, not an emotion judge. And then we got to learn the skills. So what are these skills? We call them the ruler skills. Now, on a scale from 1 to 5, how skilled do you think you are? 1, you are emotionally bankrupt. 5, you are super skilled. How many of you give yourself a 1? You're like, not very skilled. Anyone? 2, 3, 4s and 5s, raise your hands. Okay. So I hate to give you the results of the research. But I've done about 10 studies on this, and the correlation coefficient between your self-rated emotional intelligence and your actual emotional intelligence is about 0. Sorry. How do you know how skilled you are at reading emotions and regulating emotions compared to who? Like compared to my father, I'm a genius. Right? Compared to the Dalai Lama, I need some work. Now you might ask your teams at work, what do they think? And what my research shows there is it's not really about your emotional intelligence. It's really about likability. It's about your reputation. Because nobody can get in your head. They don't really know how skilled you are. So with that said, we have to move on in terms of our assessment. Now, some of you may know a very close friend of mine who was a professor at Wharton. Her name is Sigal Barsaid. She was one of the key leaders in the thinking around emotional contagion. For 5 years before she passed recently, we have been working on new assessment tools to really capture these skills. They've been submitted for publication, and they'll be out very soon, where we use dynamic performance assessments to help people really get an accurate understanding of their skills. So first skill, identifying emotion. I'm looking at all of you right now and trying to figure out how are you feeling? But I see people from various genders and ethnic backgrounds, and the question is, can I read how you're feeling? And I think we need to be more humble than we might think we are around this, because there are a lot of factors, and we're going to try it. As the proclaimed gay Jewish man, who's neurotic, by the way, as well, going to add more characteristics to my identity, I'm going to use the 4 of you. because you're easy. I'm going to display an emotion, and you're going to tell me what it is. Okay, what did you say? Slightly curious. Disinterested. Those are very correlated.
Straight.
Confident. Playful and naughty. Okay. So let's go back. Let's review. So, curious. Slightly curious. Disinterested. Unsure. Playful and naughty. So flirtatious. Yeah. So we're going to go out for dinner tonight, right? Oh, you're sitting at a bar. I walk into the bar and make that expression. You're like, well, this guy's kind of interesting. I'm going to talk to him. You're like, I don't know. You're thinking like, I got no clue what's going on. She's like, wow, I'm going to go on a date tonight.
She could point out in it.
All with the same face. So what does this teach us about emotion perception? We don't know shit. That means we make a lot of errors. But we use that skill to make predictions about people, don't we? I want to be with this person. I don't want to be with this person. I want to promote this person. I'm not going to promote this person. I want to go out for lunch with them. I don't want to go out for lunch with them. They're interested in having a conversation with me. They don't care about me. Because all of you, I'm giving the same expression. You're thinking I'm disinterested. You're thinking I'm interested. So the stories that you're going to share with your colleagues are going to be completely different. The second skill, just to kind of summarize, right? We know that most emotion displays are subtle. The second is that who's right? And I think it's just critically important to understand that we're oftentimes attributing emotion to people as opposed to knowing how people actually feel. And finally, we do have to recognize that there is bias here. And that's been demonstrated in our own research. And it's not necessarily always a racial bias, but it can be a racial bias. It's just an in-group bias. Meaning that when you were raised, where I was raised in northern New Jersey with mostly white Irish Catholic people, that was my exposure to reading people's facial expressions. And then I went to South Korea to study martial arts, and I was like, what the hell is going on here? How are people feeling? It's a whole different cultural rule around expression. And I was making the judgments. I became the emotion judge. And so we're going to make attributions. And the only way not to make those attributions is to get to know people, right, and ask the question. Understanding emotion. Where are these feelings coming from? How do they affect my thinking and behavior? Just a few things about this. Earlier in psychology, there was a lot of theories around basic emotions: happy, sad, anger, fear, surprise, disgust, contempt. It's been mostly debunked. Of course, there are kind of these emotions across cultures, but not as strong as people might have thought. What I think is most important is what I shared this morning, which is that we have to understand that there are themes to emotions. That anger is about injustice, disappointment about unmet expectations, as the example I gave earlier. But we have to empathize and understand that the things that may cause us to feel this way can be completely different and unrelatable. And it's not for us to be the knower, it's for us to be the explorer and the empathizer. Labeling emotion. So this is interesting, right? Because during the pandemic, I must have done 100 workshops on healthy regulation strategies. And I asked people, what's the difference between and among anxiety, stress, pressure, fear, and overwhelmed? And most people said there's no difference, especially leaders of companies. And I said, but it's not a trick question. What is the difference? And does it matter? What do you think? Physical sensations? What's the psychological difference? I'm sorry? The what? The cause. So what's the difference? What are the different causes? What would make you feel overwhelmed versus anxiety versus pressure versus stress versus fear? How many of you feel like if I gave you this vocabulary test, you'd get 100? if I had to ask you to write in the definitions. But yet so many of our field, the work in mindfulness, is about stress reduction or anxiety management or fear. But yet are we actually helping people to deal with the feelings they're actually feeling? At Yale, most of my students say they're anxious and stressed. When I ask them to describe deeply what their experiences are, they're not anxiety and stress. The real feeling is envy. Envy. Everything is about everyone else being better than they are, more talented than they are, having better, more connections and opportunities. It's all about social comparison, but they label it as anxiety and stress. And then what happens is what? The university has yoga and mindfulness programs to support the students in managing their stress and anxiety. And I had a huge fight. I'm glad I have tenure with the counseling center, because I'm like, where is the research which shows that downward dog reduces envy? I mean, let's get real here. I had this visual of like people in downward dog and like the envy just coming out of their rear end. I mean, let's be real. Like, I mean, it's just ridiculous. I'm definitely not going to have a drink tonight. So as we get granular here, anxiety, stress, pressure, fear, overwhelmed. Oh my. Do we see that there are differences? Do we see that if we were to become emotion coaches with our families and our colleagues and our kids, we would be better able to support them in finding strategies to manage their feelings? Because honestly, if you're feeling stressed and you got too many demands and not enough resources, the only thing that's really going to help is if you take stuff off your plate or get support. You do all the breathing exercise you want, but every day you're going to wake up and have too many demands and not enough resources, too many demands, not enough resources. Expressing emotions. Knowing how and when to express emotion with different people and across contexts, including the influences of personality, gender, and power, and social norms, and race, and ethnicity, and culture. This is a topic that I think just needs to be really openly talked about. And I was listening to the keynotes earlier today about how we, have to clump identities, and I'm a little nervous about that, to be just honest about that. And what I mean by that is that we can't just, I don't think, look at character. I think we have to really take seriously these demographic variables. And just, here's the example. I may be gay and Jewish, but I'm white. And I work at Yale. And I just have privilege, period. The rules are different for me than they are. My husband is Panamanian. He's very dark-skinned. We were in Princeton, New Jersey, visiting my brother. We both walk into a little antique shop. They don't look at me the way they look at him. They're not monitoring me like they're monitoring him. He's got a degree from Columbia University. He's smarter than I am, actually. Not really. He's definitely more emotionally intelligent than I am. I study it, but he's got it. And so I share that with you because there are rules in society about who gets to express certain emotions. Not everybody can be angry. The rules are different in our society about anger and other emotions too. The rules are different for gender. We just published a big study, 14,000 employees, and we looked at women's expression of emotion in the workplace. And what we found was that there is a glass ceiling for women. The more women go up in the hierarchy, the more inhibited they feel in being their true selves. They can't have permission to feel because they're going to be judged. And it's problematic. Last thing is regulating emotions. The thoughts and actions we use to do lots of things with our feelings. Maybe we want to prevent unwanted emotions, reduce the difficult ones, initiate ones to inspire our teams. I think even in the field of emotion regulation, we're very limited in the way we think about it. It's mostly about getting rid of negative feelings. But I don't know about you, but when you manage teams, it's about generating emotions that are going to help people do better work. That's not down-regulating emotions. That's up-regulating emotions to achieve a goal. Here's what I call the Big Seven. And I don't have time to go into this right now, so I can share this with you another time. But according to the research, what I found is that here are the buckets for where there's evidence for healthy regulation. And I think many of us fail to recognize that healthy regulation includes sleep, nutrition, and physical activity, that we need to be prepared to regulate. Now, I want to end by just saying a few last things. One, this is not about controlling. That concept drives me out of my mind. Impulse control, self-control. Honestly, it's the end of the day. It is my job as your presenter to co-regulate how you're feeling. Just like when you're a leader or manager, you are co-regulating the emotions of everyone who works with you. As a principal of a school, you are co-regulating the emotions of the faculty. As a teacher, you are co-regulating the emotions of the students in your classroom. And how you feel is contagious. And the challenge with emotional contagion is that kids and other people catch your emotions, but they catch it outside of their conscious awareness. So start feeling your anxiety, and when you ask them why, they can't tell you. And this is why it really is our moral obligation to be self-aware. So last few things. Do these skills matter? This is way too detailed for today. It's a paper that one of my former students and colleagues and I put together on what we call the emotionally intelligent organization. We reviewed all the literature from the skill-based to the motivational pieces to the contextual pieces, and put together a model that I think can be helpful for people to think about it from an HR perspective, from a hiring perspective, from a training perspective, from just getting people's attitudes and mindsets in the right place. And with that said, as we wrap up, first, here's what we know from the research. This is 14,000 people across the United States. We have the skill of the supervisor, and the circles are how people feel working for those people. How many of you want to work for the leader who is low in emotion skills? Anyone? It's incredible. Frustration is 40% higher in a team where there's a leader with low emotional intelligence. Inspiration is 35% higher in a team where there's a leader with high emotional intelligence. And you can look at all these different outcomes: skill acquisition, turnover intention, job satisfaction, burnout, engagement, fear of speaking up, ethics in the workplace, all inextricably linked to the emotion skills of the person in charge. So when people say, like, this is soft skill, I'm like, we have to refine our definitions of these concepts. So a few last things. One is that if you'd like to learn more, you can join us for some webinars. This is one that's coming up in a few weeks. You can just take a picture. I'll send out these slides. And let me end by putting it all together. Oh, sorry. Take a picture. And I know I'm watching Mo as he steps closer to me. It's an indicator, like, you got 1 minute, you got 30 seconds, you got 15 seconds. Okay. Happy to send these slides out. Let's wrap up. Can I ask everyone to get good posture in their seats for our last 30 seconds together? You'll live longer. I have no research to support that. You'll look better, though. Let's take a nice long inhale. Oh, gosh. 2 full days of incredible learning. So if I can put everything I've talked about in my 45 minutes together into one slide, it's this. We have to start by giving ourselves and everyone we care about the permission to feel. Think about what that means to you. Permission to feel. What the research shows, it's empathy, it's compassion, it's non-judgment, it's supportive, it's curiosity. I'm going to strive to be an emotion scientist and not an emotion judge. Remember that emotional intelligence is about using all emotions wisely. There's no such thing as a bad emotion. Anxiety is important. Guilt is important. Guilt has helped me be a better person. Embarrassment has helped me be a better person. I appreciate that this is life's work. I thought the pandemic hit, like, I'm going to be great. I got all the strategies in the world. The stock market was crashing. Mother-in-law was complaining. I was not okay. I had to replace strategies. I like hot power yoga. How many of you are going to hot yoga in April of 2020? Right? Think about the breathing exercises. Like no one's going to yoga during the pandemic, right? And so what's my replacement strategy? Yelling at my mother-in-law. Lastly, I just want to say, we have to all be the role model. I have a motto in my work, and I try to do this. It doesn't always work. It's just be the first. Be the first. Why not? Be the first to apologize. Be the first to ask for forgiveness, as you heard. Be the first to say, we need to work on this. I know from my research, and I didn't get into the details of this today, that these are skills that have to be built in systems. If you're just doing the workshop here and there, you're not going to create an emotionally intelligent system. You're going to create a few people here and there that are interested in it, and they're going to kind of take it and use it. But going back to that component of expressing emotions, if we're in a society where there's no equity, where certain people have the permission to be angry and others don't, then we're not doing the work. And so it's not about the individuals who don't have the permission to feel to say, give me the permission to feel. It's about creating a society where we ensure that everyone has the permission to feel. Now, we'll just end by saying, first, thanks again, Mo. Secondly, is, oftentimes people come up to me after these kinds of things, like, gosh, you've made it. You were abused and bullied, and you're gay and you're Jewish, and you still made it. And I thank them for that. And deep inside, I'm thinking, like, you don't really get it. I was blessed in life, even with all my abuse. I was blessed that I had parents who didn't know what the hell to do, but they got me a therapist when I disclosed her. I was blessed that Uncle Marvin came into my life. I was blessed that I got involved in the martial arts and became a black belt instructor of the martial arts. I was blessed I got to go to college and learn these concepts. I was blessed that I got a PhD in psychology. I was blessed that I have the privilege of running a center at an Ivy League university and have a team of people that help me write curriculum and run around the world doing this work. And I just don't think everyone's going to have that luck. And so I'll end by saying, I've come to the conclusion that it's our moral obligation, real moral obligation, to ensure that every one of our kiddos gets that emotion education. And what that really, really means is that it's our moral obligation, all of us, to be the best possible role models for them. And on that note, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.